look like. So I have two videos that I want to show. Hopefully it will work. So that's one example of loyalty and collusion. And I'll talk more about, there's so much I could say about R. Kelly getting awards that I won't talk about today. But my favorite part of that video is the woman who has the Black Lives Matter t-shirt on. So this video is a really good video. I highly suggest that those of you that are doing the work check this video out.
So imagine if all of us thought that it was unthinkable to assault women, what might happen if the judge thought that, if the pastor thought that. So these are individuals, for example, who we often refer to as reality definers. They have the power to shape normal.
You bring the hawk in the chicken yard and wonder why the chicken's not eaten up. You bring the mindful beauty company and all the time parading in front of my no, Mike, no. I mean, how many times, sister, have you said no and you mean yes all the time? When I'm talking to women now, we gonna talk. Yeah, in the name of the BS is all. You're not dealing with a man that don't know you. And damn deceitful game that you play.
This notion that my passions, my sense of my immediate gratification somehow or another supersedes all of your rights as a human. I mean, it's just, really, it's just ludicrous. I mean.
Imagine the strength of that man. You know, heavyweight champion. Nobody wanted to talk about her. It was what would she do in his group? Why wouldn't she go to him? A lot of these girls say, well, she knew better, she knew. Also, what are you saying? That Mike is only capable of thinking to his peers that is normal for a woman to come up, for a man to have his way with her? I mean, this makes sense to you? This makes sense to us? And here we are, all these black women, thinking that she's wrong because she enticed him.
Well, I have some argument with the man on this because they were of the position that because Desiree, or I think that was her name, came to his hotel room, that was an invitation for her to be raped. And that it was a stupid decision for her to go to his hotel room. Well, I agree, it was a stupid decision to go to the hotel room. The problem is rape has never been really a punishment for stupidity. Because if it was, a whole lot of men need to be bending over. Because I know a lot of stupid men.
A man can go out with a woman, can spend all his money, can indeed he can promise to give it to her. They can go to a room, house, partner, hotel, whatever, and take a shower together and start playing around together and start actually doing it. She never loses her right to say no, even in the act.
This guy raped her. Who could fight Mike Tyson? Grown men who are trained to fight can't beat this man up. But you want Desiree Washington somehow show have been beaten up.
I just came here to pray that the jury, after all evidence is in, they would decide on the evidence of the case and not on race. Both of them belong to us, and we must love both of them. We cannot destroy anybody to build up another body.
Unfortunately, many leaders of black communities, who are often clergy, stand with black males, even black males who have admitted, and even in some cases, as in the case of Tyson, have been convicted of raping black women. And it is a tremendous betrayal, in fact, of black women. It is a betrayal of black women who have been raped. It is a way of saying that their experience doesn't matter. And in churches, it is a way of saying that black women should sacrifice themselves, sacrifice their needs, sacrifice their dignity to the black community, to the black man.
Islam, which certainly both in the countries of its origin and in the way it's being practiced among African Americans here in America, the United States, we are finding women pushed to the background again and not having a role. And I think that this sanctions sexual oppression of women, abuse of women. And I'm very alarmed as a Muslim myself about this, because when I read the tracts and pamphlets and things that you find in the black community coming from an Islamic perspective, they play up the one verse in the Quran that gives men the permission to beat their wives. And this is being really promoted in our communities, and it's causing a lot of consternation on my part that this is going to increase domestic violence amongst Muslim people and black people in this country.
Those ministers rallied around our brother Mike, praying for our brother Mike, who had violated this girl. Nobody said a prayer for Desiree Washington.
There's still a strong held belief that women provoke violence. And so there's an example. If we think that women provoke the violence, disorder that they experience, then there we go. Men are not going to trust men. They provoke each other to deserve what they get.
She's raped by my cousin. And then she exposes this rape. My question is, why would that make her great? The traitor is to have a rapist in our community. And they don't want anybody.
So I really love those two clips. Some of it can be a little hard to watch, but I feel like they really get to the heart of what loyalty and collusion really looks like. And just underneath, and I mean the examples can go on and on, right? We can talk about what happened to Rihanna after Chris Brown. We can talk about Janae Rice. We can talk going back to R. Kelly, who has a long history of, you know, molesting young girls, marrying Aaliyah when he was 28 and she was 15, right? The video that came out that of him denigrating another 15-year-old girl, a 15-year-old girl that was actually the daughter of his band member, a band member that settled for money out of court over his own daughter before the video came to light, right? So what is the reason for this? Why are, you know, so part of it, I mean, y'all are in school, I'm sure you're engaging in these conversations about the status of women and whose life really matters and who's really important. But just underneath that is a term called mysogynoir. And mysogynoir is really the misogyny that's directed particularly at African American women. It goes a little deeper than the mainstream feminist discourse that talks about misogyny. It's a special type of misogyny that's directed specifically at us, right? And it shows how race and gender both play together. And the term was coined by Moya Bailey in 2010, and she created the term to address the misogyny directed towards Black women in America in visual and pop culture. And so I like it because it talks about the specific misogyny and that's uniquely detrimental. So what does it look like, right? Misogynoir looks like this, right? You guys still want Black girls, hashtag ruin a Black girl's day. And the group is No Black Girls, Mixed Couples. And for those of you that don't know, there's lots of groups like this on the internet. Right? And so, actually going back to this, so what this has to do with is painting African American women as undesirable, right? So we look at Venus and Serena Williams and how they're routinely called manly, how Michelle Obama last year was the Latino reporter from Univision said she looked like a cast of the Planet of the Apes. And if you put in the internet Michelle Obama and monkey, there are so many memes out there that it's just incredible. The first lady of this country called a monkey, right, last year. So that's what misogynoir is. Second thing is Black women's pain as entertainment. Russell Simmons, I don't know if you were all familiar with this, in 2013, Russell Simmons posted a rape parody of Harriet Tubman being raped by a slave master. And it drove millions of people to his website, his new website that he was trying to introduce to the public. This was sort of the first video that he used. Now, he took it down, but only after millions of people went to the website, and it came out on the same day as Ava DuVernay Smith released a beautiful Black movie about Black love. That's what misogynoir looks like. Again, Black women's pain as entertainment, Black women's bodies on display, right? Invisible visibility. We're highly visible, but we're invisible at the same time. This picture right here is the Swedish minister, right? She's the minister of culture. And in 2012, they were having some kind of gallery opening, and an artist made this rendition of a Black woman, clearly looking like something from Jim Crow's South, right? And they cut into the cake, and then the artist who made it posted it on his Facebook page and called it a genital mutilation cake. And then he was surprised and outraged that people thought he was a racist. Right? He couldn't believe it. He was just like, we're not racist. This is Sweden. We're not racist. So he was shocked, right? And then over here we have Sarah Bartman, the Hottentot Venus. Is anybody familiar with Sarah Bartman? Okay, good. So I don't have to go into a lot of detail about Sarah Bartman, but what we know about Sarah is she was a South African woman, and she was born in 1789, and she was basically, it was said that she signed a contract to be taken around England and Ireland for entertainment and purposes, and exhibition purposes, by an English ship's doctor, right? But the thing was, Sarah couldn't have signed anything because she was completely illiterate. The village she came from did not speak English. They did not write anything down, but she signed this contract where she was supposed to get a certain amount of portions from her being on display. Now, she was on display because she had a large butt and because of her unusual coloring. So what happened to Sarah was taken all around Europe for many, many, many years. She was put in human zoos, because they had human zoos back then, and barely clothed, and people would pay money, good money, to Europeans to see this woman on display, invisible visibility. Sarah died at the age of 26, and we don't know if she died from alcoholism or pneumonia or smallpox, but what we do know is that her owner, the man who bought her, pickled her brain and her genitalia and put it in the Museum of Man, where it stayed till 1974. All right? That's what misogynoir looks like. So when you think about this history, now I didn't know about Sarah Bartman. I didn't know about all of these things that were happening to me, right? That happened to other women. But I had already gotten the message that there was no protection for me, that nobody is gonna really go there for me. So why would I really go to some police officers who were probably white and tell them what this Puerto Rican guy did to me? Why would I do that? That made no sense to me. Even in my early 20s, I knew better. So the last thing I'm going to talk about is shame and the strong black woman, right? It's handled. I've got it, right? So on its head, right, this is a great thing, right? This strong black woman thing, it's great. But one of the things we talk about at my organization, the Women of Color Network, is that many things can be true at once, right? And so something that can be true is that many of us carry a shame about our history, about the things that I just shared. Many of us are just beginning to like our natural hair, our complexion, our bodies, because of all of these messages, right? So that can be true. But then the narrative is that we're this strong black woman. We can handle it. We've got it. So when things happen to us, that is what's playing in your mind. You don't want to be looked at as weak. You don't want to be looked at as somebody that needs help. You're not going to ask for help. Because even up until recently, therapy and things like that, that was looked at as something that white people did, right? You don't talk about your dirty laundry. You don't put your dirty laundry in the street. You handle your business. And that is the behavior that's actually rewarded. Vulnerability is not always rewarded, right? For women, for the most part, right? But in particular, women of color. So the last piece, actually I do want to say something about many. Does anybody have a question about many things being true at once? That you can have these two truths happening at the very same time, so you can be super strong, and that can be a really good thing. It's aspirational, it's something to strive to, but at the same time, it can be something that causes an enormous amount of pain, shame, and can keep you in dangerous situations, right? So now I'm going to shift, because I like to end on a positive note after all of that. So, but the last thing I do want to say about that is, before we even get to the healing, we have to come out of the silence piece, right? Because although silence can be rewarded, and because carrying heavy burdens silently can be rewarded, it's not the way to magic. It's not the way to find your magic. So that's what we'll talk about now, is magic, right? And so this photo was from a retreat that my girlfriends and I did last summer in Vermont. It was a glorious retreat. One of my homegirls is here now. She was with us. So for me, really in order to heal, and not just from that scene that you saw, but just from like life, just from like walking through life, which I'm sure anybody in this room can relate to, that walking through life can be challenging, regardless of who you are, right? In order for me to heal, though, I had to look at non-traditional ways of healing. I had to embrace the fact that my healing could not be intellectualized, right? Healing is not an intellectual journey. Study after study shows that trauma gets in your cells, it gets in your bones, it changes your worldview, it causes illnesses. And so because I do a lot of healing and wellness work, a lot of the work I do is about helping to sort of shake that trauma out of ourselves, right? So we can go back to the person, the people that we came here to be, like my photo that I showed you in the beginning of this talk. So part of reclaiming your magic is around ritual, engaging in ritual, creating ritual wherever you are, like us today. I feel, every time we perform, it's like we create ritual, even just for ourselves, right? And it's fitting that we're in this sort of ritualistic type hall, which is awesome to me. So what you see here is a bucket of rainwater that we caught during our retreat, and we mixed it with essential oils and wildflowers that were growing on the land that we were in, and we bathed in that day, right? That's some of the things we do. Transition rituals, how you come into your space. What do you do when you come home? Light a candle, burn incense. What do you do in the morning? Do you journal? All of these things to sort of get you centered, right? Telling your story. So what you saw was an excerpt, but it's part of a larger play. And so this is a scene this is a picture of a small theater in Asheville, North Carolina that commissioned the play, and they put it on last year. And one of the things that the artist said was that their lives have changed forever because of the truth of it. And so one of the things that I've come to find out is when you tell your story, when you tell your truth, you give other people permission to tell their truths as well, right? So no matter how crazy you think your story is, there's somebody out there that needs to hear it. And that's a part of the healing process. The more I tell my story, it's like it didn't even happen to me now. I'm sure some of y'all are like, man, how's she just rattling that stuff off? Because I've told it so much that it's not really a part of me anymore. So sometimes it's good to get that stuff out by telling your story. Community, right? So that bag says we take back our power, because that's sort of one of the last lines in the play. And so so food is always a thing, especially with women, right? And so this was the after party of the play, and they all had little bags that said we take back our power. And so community is super important in the healing process. Again, healing is not something you can do alone, and it's not something that can be intellectualized. So then moving towards liberation, right? So this is the group I'm in, and it's called the Black Witch Chronicles, and that is me right there. And we came together to really help people, but also to help ourselves sort of decolonize our minds, right? From what Bell Hooks calls white supremacist capitalist patriarchy. And Bell Hooks really talks about the fact that she wanted some language that would actually remind us continuously of the interlocking systems of domination that define our realities, and not to just have one thing be like, gender is an important issue, race is the important issue. But for her, the use of this particular jargon or phrase is a shortcut way, she says, of saying all of these things are actually functioning simultaneously at the same time, right, in our lives. And so if we really want to understand what's happening, this is Bell Hooks talking, she says, if I want to understand what's happening to me right now, at this moment in my life, as a Black female of a certain age group, I won't be able to understand it if I'm only looking through the lens of race. I won't be able to understand it if I'm only looking through the lens of gender. I won't be able to understand it if I'm only looking at how white people see me. And she goes on to say that she prefers the term white supremacy over white racism, because racism doesn't really allow for a discourse on colonization or decolonization. And it also doesn't really talk about the way that people of color discriminate against each other. It doesn't talk about internalized oppression, right, or internalized sexism, if we're looking at it from a feminist perspective. But by putting it in this larger framework, we can talk about how all of these different isms intersect and affect our lives, if that makes sense. So part of the work we do is to really use holistic practices, Reiki, acupuncture, meditation, to help people shake loose the trauma, to help people begin to decolonize their minds, and get people to say, well, what do they mean by witch? Why are they saying Black witch? Well, I'll tell you, we say Black witch because we Black, so that's why I say Black. And we say, that's what it is. And we say witch because the word means wise woman. If you look it up, it can also mean medicine woman, it can mean midwife. And one of the things that we don't talk about when we talk about witches, and we talk about the witch trials, which Dr. G says were very successful, is that these were women that were actually landowners. These were women that were single. These were women that didn't bow down to patriarchy. And so part of the witch trials was really to punish these women who were bucking the system. But that's another talk for another day. I can talk about that all day. But so that's a lot of the work we do, is to just really engage people in conversations. And we do this by YouTube, and we do it on our Facebook page, and we get tons of emails from people questioning us about their spirituality and the questions they have. So that's Black Witch Chronicles, and for me, this is the step to liberation for me. So G and I did an interview the other night, and the interviewer asked me what I thought the future held. And I told her that the future was going to be whatever we decided it to be. And then I thought about it, and I was like, so do you really mean that? Is that what you really want to say? And so then I thought, I am an optimist. Even with all my conspiracy theories, I am an optimist. And, I see a bright future, right? And that's what I told her. I couldn't get up in the morning if I didn't see a bright future, right? And for me, what the future looks like is a future where Tituba wins. So in closing, I was thinking about this week, and I wrote this piece yesterday, and this is what I want to close with. He says without saying, you're not worthy, you are not loved, and you know all the reasons why. I looked unworthiness in the face. I didn't challenge, I didn't run, didn't call it liar. I sat, I let it talk. When it was done, I felt a smile spread across my face because I knew that it was nothing. I looked my spirit in the face. I I didn't run, I didn't challenge, I sat, listening, feeling my heart open, I let it talk. When it was done, I felt a smile cross my face because I knew that I was everything. Thank you. So we have time for some questions, so if you want to ask questions, feel free. I gave you a lot of information.
Do you find that the irony in having this presentation and conversation at this institution?
Do I find it an irony having this conversation here? I don't think so. I think that I celebrate that I was invited to come here, and when they reached out to me, I was like, why me? How'd you find me? You know, I just think it's great. I think that it's a great opportunity to talk about things that aren't always talked about. So I'm just grateful to be here. Yeah. Mhm.
What pushed you to sort of start telling your story? What was that? What pushed you? Can you go down?
I can hear you.
Okay. What pushed you to start telling your story?
What pushed me to start telling my story?
To write a whole scene on it, like,
You know, I just think I wanted to tell the truth. I just think I wanted to tell the truth. Because I started out writing another story that was fiction, and then the true story started coming out. And so the lie story couldn't be written anymore. The words wouldn't even come out anymore. And so I just started telling this story. So, yeah.
Thank you for the presentation. You mentioned a little bit about the collusion loyalty aspect.
Yes.
How would you imagine that aspect? Would that start from the photograph or something?
Right, so how can loyalty, and how can we sort of turn loyalty and collusion on its head, right? I just think we need to start having real conversations, scary conversations, uncomfortable conversations. I feel like that's the only way it's gonna really start. Lots of education with thought leaders, like Lester and Celine on the 2 minute video. We're talking about that so many of these people who are leaders, it's so important for them to really be educated. I feel like a lot of this is about socialization and how we're socialized and how we're miseducated, right? And so just having a re-education process, I think, is a start. And it is happening, you know, across the country. There's men's groups that work all across the country about the Indian masculinity and things like that. Organizations like Apollo's Events, I think we're here last year, so I was here. So, yeah, I just think it starts with conversation.
Thankful, this is really great. I love, in particular, the way you ended on really looking at practices of self-care and healing and giving people strength to keep moving. I wonder, I see spaces at times where people get pushback for that, that they shouldn't be taking that time out to go meditate or whatever because there's work to be done. I have a lot of answers to that, but I'm curious to hear how you manage that. I assume you hear that sometimes too.
Well, yeah, so let me preface this by saying I worked in the domestic violence movement for almost 15 years now. And so this is such a new conversation. We really just started talking about self-care probably within the last 5 years. And you see it a lot with people who are organizing, that the cause has to come first. And I used to do that myself when I was like really in the thick of it. I'd be like, well, Martin Luther King didn't see his family. And Alice Walker has a confrontational relationship with her daughter. But, you know, she works for the greater good. You know, it's always this thing of pushing forward for the cause, And so for me, I just had to really look at my life and just say, wow, like you're at this age and all you do is work and you don't have a family, you don't have a life, like wow, you know? And so sometimes it takes that looking inward. So I don't get as much pushback as I used to when people were like, oh, that's woo-woo, we can't do that, we don't have time. I actually train domestic violence shelters now. I go into shelters and work with them and take them through retreats on self-care. And so, yeah, so there's not as much pushback as there used to be. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I was especially moved by the performance just because I think my question is what moved you to change man to a woman? And do you have experience with Black queer
don't, but, so, and Sherry Colon, she actually, oh, let me introduce my own song. Okay, so we got started so quickly. So this is Chantal Maurice, right? And she is woman number 4. And then we have Vesta, she's woman number 2. And we have Sherry, who is woman number 3. So Sherry and I really crafted this piece together. And so because of my history in the domestic violence movement, I really wanted to create, again, a piece that was truthful. So all throughout the piece, there's domestic violence that happens between women. So it was really just to be inclusive. And even with the piece with Chantal around the body image and sort of the transformation, right, from sort of the female to the male character, I just really want to be inclusive. I don't want anybody to come to my shows and not see themselves. Yeah.
How do you feel like men, but particularly black men, can help like promote like this narrative of black men in terms of they go both like counterculture and just generally like
Yeah, that's a great question. So what can black men in particular do? So I would say that, so we've had tons of brothers come to the show and self-disclose about things that have happened to them in their lives. And I think that, starting that conversation among men, I think is really important. Like men really working with other men to question themselves. And I don't, though using the word accountability is a very popular word in my movement, but I like to say offer an alternative because it feels a little bit more open to me. And so, so really working with other men to open themselves up, to open conversation, because really, like, y'all have to do it with each other, right? Because one of the things we know is how sexism works. A lot of times it's hard for women to get these issues across to other men, right? So because you listen to each other and you respect each other, it's really important that you all work with each other and start groups questioning masculinity. What's the cost of this masculinity? What's the cost to me as a man, right? Because the other thing is, it's the same thing I say with white folks, like, you're not doing this work to help us people of color, us poor people of color, right? Being not racist actually helps you. It's actually good for your health not to be racist. And it's the same thing for men. Combating sexism is actually good for you. You know that men die long, they die quicker, they have more illnesses, heart attacks, and things like that. And part of that is staying within that rigid man box, right? So really looking at how you can get out of that trap